Welcome to Peanuts from the Plebs.
Hello, welcome everyone.
Welcome.
Well, should we get the obvious out of the way first?
I guess.
All right.
Sure.
So, remind me what happened this week.
This is Jim's box right here. I know that this is where he lives, so.
All right.
Okay, but if we're talking Kamala Harris, I guess it's. I mean, everyone kind of knew it was going to be Susan Rice or Kamala Harris. Everyone recently there had come up a lot of things had come up, like Susan Rice had, over $500,000 investment in Keystone Pipeline, stuff like that. And I'm not sure if that was a last minute negative. I still kind of think there was probably an internal war between like the Obamas and the Clintons or something like that. And since Clinton pretty much funded the DNC for the past so many years, I think that she won, basically,
I mean, you've been pretty much.
So we have a puppet. We got a puppet.
You've been on target, Jim, with your predictions. So I think you said I was like Susan Rice, and you were like, no, Kamala Harris, because Hillary's behind her and everything, and lo and behold, you're right.
Yeah, I kind of thought it could have gone either way between the two of them, but I had heard just enough negative stuff like that. There was investment kind of concerns and things like that seemed like it was, swinging it that way. But so I don't really have a lot to say about it. I think everyone's just kind of appalled. We have when we have justice and racial justice and war on drugs and things like this are front and center in people's minds. We have the guy that wrote the crime bill and a super cop as our team. So it's kind of really bizarre. It goes back to the thing that you were saying, Steve, but whether or not, are they really trying to win? I mean, is the idea that it's easier not to be in power, but.
Well, I think that it's just the Democratic Party once again showing that they are not democratic, the irony in their name, because Kamala was the one that they had chosen from the beginning, and now they're going to get their candidate. They saw that her vehicle was off to the side with all four tires, right? It was an abomination what her campaign actually turned out to be, because after all the money that was pushed into her campaign, and then for her to just flop the way that she did, which is almost like maybe it was done on purpose that she got out when she did, that way she wouldn't really have to have, because right now what they're saying is that how could Joe Biden pick her after, she pretty much called him a racist and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. So, but there isn't much other ammunition that they can throw at them. You know what I'm saying? So this way it kind of left it so that she was clean. She could be a VP candidate and it wouldn't be seen as like, where did this even come from? It's like if, I don't know, like Obama and Hillary would have been, on the same ticket. It would have been weird because they went at each other pretty hard.
I'm just surprised that he picked such, or that whoever picked it for him picked such a weak, figure. Obviously, she had done so poorly in primaries and wasn't even going to win in her own state. I mean, this is like the weakest possible.
Steve, but are you okay when you say that you're surprised by this?
Well,
are you being sarcastic? Or are you serious?
Yes, because obviously they could have. Well, I thought like maybe they would pick somebody like Tammy Duckworth or somebody who like had some appeal outside of like the main, the corporate wing, which is basically the whole party. And then I was kind of hoping against hope, but not really. And then I wasn't surprised when the inevitable happened.
Yeah, I agree with Daisy's analysis that in the beginning it was going to be all Kamala. Like basically, she inherited some of Hillary's people at the was it the Center for American Security, right, and all that kind of stuff.
Center for American Progress.
No, but it's also there's also a Center for American Security. It's something that has like a whole bunch of other warmongers and so forth. Yeah, we'll look it up. We'll put the link below. But And what happened is, and that's why she was allowed to go after Biden that hard. She was going to be the one, and she was going to be, the black woman racial justice candidate. So now, then, obviously she fell completely apart. They had to get her out before she got devastated in California, because that's thoroughly embarrassing, like what happened to Warren in Massachusetts. And so now they're going to have to double down twice as hard on Trump derangement syndrome and Russia stuff, because they've got these weird, it's really hard to say that Kamala makes sense in any way. I do want to say one quick other thing. Kim Iverson had a interesting point that if she were to, if Biden were to drop out like just after the second year, Kamala would actually get to serve out that term, so 2 more years, and then be president for 2 more full terms.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah, so that's kind of a danger, whether or not the parties start playing that game all the time, put in a puppet that they can yank back at the last minute and continue ruling for longer.
My question is that, so is the facade not like, are we still pretending like this is a democracy and that, people's, voices actually matter, like what the people actually want actually matters? Is that even a thing anymore?
Well,
I don't even think they care about like the veneer anymore. It's just like, no, listen, this is what we want. You're going to take it. This is the pile of shit that you're going to get, and you're going to like it.
I still can't get past the Epstein stuff, that there's that picture that Maxwell, after she was known to be a predator monster, was at Chelsea's wedding. They invited her. Chelsea and family members went on vacation with Maxwell after that time. And all the recent stuff shows that at least a couple people put Clinton on the island, and also a lot of rapes and things happened on the airline, and he was on that 20-something times. And I can't believe they have major speaking roles. They're still the royal family of the Democrat Party. I can't understand that. I just can't get it. People are just blocking reality completely. It's so bizarre.
Well, most people don't dig beneath the surface, So I think they'll pull it off this time, or who knows? I mean, Trump may pull it off this time, but either one of those two parties is going to. I mean, one of those. Obviously, one of them is going to win, right? So nothing's really going to change. But I get these ads. I read on my iPad at night, and like Chuck Schumer pops up saying,
"Yes,
I'm raising money." Like,
yes.
I mean, like he's like the vacuum cleaner salesman who shows up at your front door. It's like, oh no, please go away. It's just like he's showing up. Nancy Pelosi's showing up, like asking for money. At least they could get somebody younger, or somebody like who has a pretense of being, more populist or whatever, to ask for money. But they can't even do that. So I think they're in their last throes. I mean, it's a very long, painful death. It's going to go on for a long time. But I think they are going down, and the fact that there are some upstart Democrats, even though like a lot of them are like AOC, they're kind of, they go both ways. But AOC, Obama wouldn't endorse AOC for re-election, for instance. So I mean, there's certain Democrats that they are not happy with because they're going against that. So I think there is upheaval in the party eventually. They're keeping a lid on it for now, but I don't know how long that's going to be able to.
They're keeping a lid on it by, I mean, all the people, Kasich is speaking at the DNC, and Bloomberg, and AOC gets a 60-second pre-recorded.
Right.
Now, I'm not a huge AOC supporter, but a lot of progressives are. Whether we just have differences of opinion about whether or not she actually still supports progressive ideals or whatever like that. But progressives do like her, and they're completely suppressing her. TYT didn't get the press pass for the
convention, right? And no press is getting into the Republican convention. But I mean, Democrats, you'd think of it. Yeah, I mean, because TYT, is supporting the Justice Democrats, who are mixed bag, I guess. But at least, they're even too far. They're too far left and radical for the mainstream party.
Yeah, that's still my feeling. No matter what I feel about TYT, they still, represent progressives, and progressives still follow them. So blocking them is a backhand to progressives.
So going with the whole like Hillary Clinton, being behind all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So she I think it was on Thursday, she was at some sort of summit, and they asked her a question about if she would be willing to serve on the Biden ticket.
Right.
And she said that she is ready and willing to serve in any capacity possible, right? And then she said, she like tweeted out once the whole thing came out with Kamala, right, that she welcomes Kamala to this historic ticket, which I was like, why are you welcoming her to the ticket? You're not on the ticket, so why are you welcoming her onto this ticket? It sounded very much like, this is my ticket that you're getting on. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm doing stuff behind the scenes.
That's a really interesting observation.
But then I was thinking to myself that obviously this would be like really like a step down for her. But what about if she were to take, let's say, Biden and Kamala win, right? And Hillary takes like more like a chief of staff type of position. And I know that that's a big downgrade for her, but it allows her to do a lot of the maniacal, you know what I'm saying? The little things in the background with no one looking at her, because no one thinks about the chief of staff, right? And you're right there at the president's ear. Like, you know what I'm saying? You're right there with everything. So
absolutely.
I think, and then once they get rid of Biden, right? Then Kamala steps in and she can have Hillary as her VP.
Oh, yeah.
And then they could do the same thing that they're thinking about Kamala, that it would be like 2 years and then they can serve 2 terms. Technically, Hillary could do the same thing.
And, just watch if she's in there at all, just watch the Clinton Foundation donations start skyrocketing again, because she's in there and she can make things happen for the power players that send money their way.
Well, it's a succession plan for the mainstream corporate Democrats to keep, if they can win 2024 and then 2028 and then keep the thing going for at least a decade or so. That's the plan, right? And keep these upstarts away.
At least that's what it seems like. It seems like that is the plan, that, they have this like dynasty that they're setting up. And again, obviously we don't have a democracy. And remember how I was talking last week about how, the issue is that no one's going to believe the results. And the Democrats are already definitely doing it. But she came out saying that, oh, well, Trump, he's not going to trust the results. He's already saying that, the results aren't going to be true. But how do you have a leg to stand on when since 2016, it's been the Democrats who have been pushing this whole narrative? Yeah. Do I have to say anything more than Russiagate?
Right. Which we can segue into a conspiracy theory corner point here. Kamala, this is on the Jimmy Dore, so Kamala actually said, and she was talking about, Pelosi's been talking about Russiagate. Oh, they're doing it 24/7, all this kind of stuff. And Kamala actually said that, people are saying that whole Colin Kaepernick thing with Take the Knee and all the riots around that, that was really a Russian bot thing.
Really?
They were pushing. That's what she said.
She went on the Breakfast Club and said that.
We're just talking madness now, right? I mean, that's crazy. And the only thing, if we were living in a sane world, Hillary should not be able to ever get into any kind of power like that, because the FBI itself declared her completely careless with classified information for spinning off this whole. But of course, that's not going to matter at all. They'll get her another security clearance if she doesn't already have one.
Well, it doesn't matter because what happened? Yeah. They went after her, but they didn't press charges. They didn't. You know what I'm saying? Like they barely went after her, and that's what happens when you don't. And that's why we continue to have all these war crimes going on all across the world, because we don't actually prosecute these warmongers. So of course,
in my head,
another one.
In my head, I've kind of been likening it to the situation we had in Massachusetts where Whitey Bulger was protected by the FBI and went on this crime spree and murdered people and pulled off all sorts of stuff because the FBI was getting a little something from him. They were getting a little information on some other bad guys who weren't nearly as bad as Whitey Bulger himself was. And it does feel like the Clintons have been protected by the FBI or the entire deep state or something at this point. It just seems impossible to continue to get away with things like this. I mean, yeah, we don't want to go down the whole email server thing again, but it's just it was
Lock her up.
Yeah, it was an obvious attempt
Listen,
to avoid
AJ
FOIA.
Goodman.
Yeah, it was an obvious attempt to avoid FOIA, and it completely ended up working because they got supported by all the people in the right places to let them cover it up. You know,
right. Okay, I was gonna segue into the situation in Massachusetts, and I forget which district it is. Is it second district or which out in Springfield, Massachusetts, and Holyoke and Northampton?
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, we have an incumbent there, Richie Neal, who is pretty much as corporate and corrupt as they come, who's been there for quite a few terms, and his challenger is Alex Morse, who is young, gay, progressive,
right.
person who seems really good. Now, recently, a story came out that Alex Morse had been he was on the faculty at I think it was UMass Amherst. I may be wrong on that, but he was on the faculty of a school and was supposedly harassing students, to go on dates on Tinder or Grindr or whatever. And it turns out that this was not the case. This was a smear job that was instigated by one of the heads of the Amherst, University of Massachusetts Amherst student Democrats, who was looking to destroy Alex Morse's challenge to Richie Neal, and thus getting a position with Richie Neal and helping Richie Neal get reelected, and thereby maybe helping himself to get a position with Richie Neal. So this came out, and this was, I think, Ryan Grimm exposed this in The Intercept, and it came out, and supposedly the Massachusetts Democratic Party was investigating this because obviously this was wrong. And now it turns out that the Massachusetts Democratic Party, who supposedly was going to be investigating this, was in on the whole thing all the time.
Oh man.
They were in on this smear job against Alex Morse and making up all the stuff about him, threatening and harassing, students, basically kind of coercing them into having sex with him or going on dates with him or whatever, which was totally fabricated. And if you look at the actual exchanges, this was covered on The Hill. If you look at the exchanges, the text messages that Alex sent to some of these students, I mean, it's just totally innocuous. Like,
right.
Oh, it's a nice day today. What are you doing tonight? Blah, blah, blah. That was what they referred to. That was the best they could come up with in terms of like harassment going on. So now Alex Morse has become the center of this last minute campaign. Well, he's been trailing by 10 points behind Richie Neal. All of a sudden, I think Justice Democrats and other groups are coming out behind Alex Morse and figuring maybe he has a chance now because of this, the backlash to this story. And I think here's another case where Richie Neal is the, approved corporate Democrat, the Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi approved Democrat, is being challenged by this upstart challenger who's, Richie Neal is like, is pro-life. He's like almost a Republican, and Alex Morse is like for single payer, for basically for the progressive platform. So I think it's interesting that that they're first of all resorting to these smear tactics, number one, which shows that they're getting really desperate, and number two, that actually this Alex Morse may have a chance now to considering how Cori Bush won in St. Louis, wasn't expected to win. Maybe Alex Morse has a chance in Massachusetts. So I thought that was interesting. You think Massachusetts too, as being one of the, less corrupt state somehow. Although of course,
I
Whitey
don't.
Bulger, Billy Bulger, right? We had that
Yeah.
connection, but
Oh, we had
you know,
3 speakers in a House in a row of the House in a row indicted, right?
yeah. So I guess we aren't really that good,
No, no.
anyways. But the thing is that actually there is there is this kind of upheaval going on. I think it's going on with outside of the party, also going on within the party, and I think it's interesting. I'm not actively, obviously, involved with that campaign, but I'm interested to see how that turns out because we're only 3 weeks away now from the primary.
Yeah, that's some nasty, evil stuff. you know, um, when people, make politics a religion, or when they've got these ulterior motives that are, profit driven, they're willing to go to great lengths to, get their guy in. And this fear of progressives of killing the golden goose, I think is pretty real.
Well, I think the
These,
change,
these people in power.
the long-term change you're seeing now is that the electorate is more interested in policy than personalities because they're starting to wake up to the fact that you have different personalities, you have the same fucking policy every time, and if you have to vote for the policy. And here's, Richie Neal is like the guy they know. He's the incumbent, so a lot of people are going to say, well, he's like head of the Ways and Means Committee. I mean, he's a senior, has a lot of power in Congress. We should reelect this guy because he represents us. He's going to bring home the bacon for the district, right? But other people are, starting to wake up and see, like, wait a second, this guy stands for, like, basically, pro-life and really conservative values, not what we want, not what the people want. So I think that's something that's a trend I see happening, that people are starting to vote on policy more than personality, which I think is a good thing.
I think it's interesting that the DNC went so hard against someone who is like so openly gay. Because I feel like it could almost be seen as they are going after him because he's gay, and because there has been such a struggle for so long for gay people as being seen as like a predator. Do you know what I'm saying? I feel like that's not a very good look for the DNC
It's not.
to back something
Yeah.
like this type of attack,
Yeah, I mean, if you've got somebody like Buttigieg who's willing to go along, right? Who's willing to, steer completely clear of progressive policies and go along with corporate warmonger stuff, then it doesn't matter. But
Well,
I
when you
understand
have
what you're
someone
saying.
like Buttigieg who is willing to sell his orientation, his sexual
Yes.
orientation,
Yeah.
in order to just be part of the club, yes, then
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a horrible look, but I don't think they really. I think they see the dollars over. I don't think they're like homophobic. I don't think they. It just doesn't matter to the same extent that supporting the existing power structure.
I think a lot of them are homophobic and
matters.
racist. I think they use the identity politics for what they can get out of it. But when push comes
right.
to shove, they're not going to let any of that get in their way, and they're going to use it as a weapon if they have to. And I think, like,
Yeah, true. Probably well
the
said.
Massachusetts Democratic Party, like that establishment, is threatened because they could lose that power in Congress. If Richie Neal loses his position, loses a position on the committee, then they potentially lose power for Massachusetts. So they can justify whatever attacks whatever we have to do. At the end justifies the means. So we can attack, we can attack him on being gay or whatever, and we'll do it in a clandestine way that, that we're not the ones attacking. It'll be it'll be done in a way that it just gets out there, that people can see this, and that this guy's some kind of, like, predator or whatever. Don't vote for this guy. We'll just smear him, but it won't be clear that we're doing the smearing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous mode of attack, I think, because just like everything with the Democratic Party, it's going to end up coming back in their face, like it's going to end up biting them in their butt. And it's interesting because isn't Morse, Alex Morse, isn't he like the mayor of
Holyoke?
Yeah, of Holyoke.
Oh, no kidding.
And apparently he's pretty popular because he's been serving for quite some time now, since he was like, what, 22 or something like that?
Yeah, it's one of the youngest mayors.
Yeah,
youngest
that's kind of crazy to have someone so young, representing, a place here, especially in Massachusetts, where it feels like it's pretty much just the old blood is who rules here, you know? So I think, but again, it goes to show you how the Democrats, they have no interest in either young voters or,
Right.
people that are informed voters, because obviously if he's been serving, if he's like an active member in his community, then he's most likely pretty popular. He has a good, following of, and I think that's what's actually helped him is the fact that he has so much support, right?
Right.
So
And
imagine
Holyoke,
if they'll do that to somebody who has so much support, imagine what they would do to somebody who didn't.
Yeah, what a terrible spot to put a campaign in like that. That they have to communicate to people who are, most of them are barely following this stuff, or they see a flyer or two or whatever. What you've been hearing from my opponents and the Massachusetts Democratic Party has been lies. This is the truth. It's such a weird story to have to tell and have people understand. When you're just trying to campaign and tell people what you want to do for them, that it's just really horrific to put them in that position.
And then you're a conspiracy theorist because you think they're out to get you.
You think the Democratic Party would possibly do, not my Democratic Party would do that.
And it does have to highlight that Richie Neal, he can't have any sort of policies that he's actually running off of that are, good policies. Because if that were the case, then they wouldn't turn to like these ad hominem attacks, or, you know what I'm saying, making it personal and making it, like this little, like almost like a schoolyard fight, instead of politics having to do with, actually representing the people of that district and doing their job, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for most people, what is their congressperson is what? Somebody call up like, I'm going to Washington. I want to get a pass to visit, to tour the White House or something. I mean, most people, they don't really have an interaction with their congressperson. It's just like, that's the personality. And if they, they get to see him on TV, maybe they get to meet him, in person a couple of times, whatever. It's been basically a beauty contest all along, and now I think things are changing because there's this little thing in the background called reality, and reality is getting worse and worse and worse. The problems are getting worse and worse and worse, and I think so. People are starting to say, "Wait, we have to start dealing with these problems. We have to have politicians who are actually going to address real issues, and not just be a personality." And that's and like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, like, what are their, Nancy Pelosi's all about the children, right? But what's the real issue? It's not about Medicare for all, or it's not about ending the wars, right? It's not about universal basic income. And also, I just saw the other day, I forget the source, but universal basic income.
It's about Russia.
It's becoming very popular. It's all about Russia, right? Right. But I mean, people are waking up to this thing. Like, come on. I mean,
Are they though? Are they really?
Well, I'm just saying, like, it starts out with, you get a critical mass. So, if you get 5% of people that are, I hate that term woke, but, people who are aware, and informed, and then it can grow from there. So it's like, you just work on getting that 5 or 10% aware, and that's not going to win elections yet, but that's the beginning of the process. Because they aren't solving the problem.
There is an interesting thing regarding the convention, though. I think the Massachusetts MPP people are going to be protesting during the week. They're actually one of the days they're actually going to be the delegates, because they're not going to Wisconsin, Milwaukee, whatever, are going to be at Suffolk Downs, and so there's going to be some signage and protests going on there, like Wednesday night.
So, and are you organizing that, Jim? In terms of
no, I got pulled in on the old man here. I don't know. I'll forget all the app names on Slack. They do all their stuff on Slack, and I basically recently got some stuff that there's this action coming up, So I'm kind of waiting to find out. I think the messaging is around Medicare for all not being in the platform. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the messaging is supposed to be, so I can make a sign this afternoon.
So is that what they're doing? Is it that they're like honing in on one message?
The first quick conversation I had with somebody, that was the impression I got. But I'm waiting for them to actually give me the final saying like what the messaging is going to be for this particular standout. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Wednesday night.
All right, can I do a little story?
You can.
Cool. All right, so I wanted to do this little story because obviously the only thing that's being talked about right now, there's lots of stuff going on, but the only thing that's really being talked about is the whole Kamala thing. But I think that, you know, like we always talk about, there's always these other things that are going on in the background that, you know, that's because they're doing the sleight of hand and showing you all this other stuff. And so Mint Press News, they came out with this story, and it says, new report reveals U.S. Special Forces active in 22 African countries. The U.S. has roughly 6,000 military personnel scattered throughout the continent, with military attaches numbering diplomats in many, oh God, not again, embassies across Africa. All right, and then this is from the 10th. A new report published in South Africa newspaper, The Mail and Guardian, has shed light on the opaque world of the American military presence in Africa. Last year, elite U.S. Special Operation Forces were active in 22 African countries. This accounts for 14% of all American commandos deployed overseas, the largest number for any region besides the Middle East. American troops had also seen combat in 13 African nations, which everybody knows about our presence in the Middle East, but no one talks about our presence in Africa. And it wasn't until those 3 soldiers died in Niger that anybody even knew that we kind of had a presence in Africa. And so it kind of just, you know, always comes down to that there's all this shit that's going on, like, you know, all the stuff with the military that we know of, it's only a sliver of the information that's actually out there, right? So it says the U.S. is not formally at war with an African nation, and the continent is barely discussed in the reference to American exploits around the globe, which is essentially what I was saying, right? So the presence of the U.S. military, especially commandos, is rarely publicly acknowledged, either by Washington or by African governments. What they are doing remains even more opaque. U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM, generally claims that special forces go no further than so-called AAA, so advise, assist, and accompany missions. Yet in combat, the role between observer and participant can become distinctly blurry. It says the United States has roughly 6,000 military personnel scattered throughout the continent, with military attaches outnumbering diplomats in many embassies across Africa. So again, there are more military personnel in the continent than there are diplomats. I think that says something.
Unbelievable. So that's like 22 countries out. I looked up that basically they're saying there's like 54 countries in Africa. So basically you're talking just like all over the
right, exactly, half the continent.
All over the continent. Yeah.
Right. So then earlier this year, The Intercept reported that the military operates 29 bases on the continent. One of these is a huge drone hub in Niger, something The Hill called the largest U.S. Air Force-led construction project of all time. The construction cost alone was over $100 million, with total operating costs expected to top $280 billion by 2024. This is one.
It must be 280 million. I can't believe it's 280 billion, because it went from the cost was 100 million to construct, and then operating costs were 280,000.
You have to think about all the personnel, like the safety. Yeah. I mean, I could, all the equipment. Yeah. I can definitely see it being $280 billion by 2024. Obviously, this is not, you know, that's 4 years from now. It can, you know, get up to more than that. Equipped with Reaper drones, the U.S. can now conduct cross-border bombing raids all over the north and west of Africa.
Wow.
Isn't that great?
You said that particular that particular base was going to be where?
Niger.
This is in Niger.
In Niger, okay.
Which is also where those soldiers died.
Which happens to be right next to Libya.
Right, where we destroyed one of the most successful African countries.
Right.
Yeah.
So Washington claims that the military's primary role in the region is to combat the rise of extremism, which is always why I'm like, so even with Tulsi, it's like we can always find a way to say that we're fighting terrorism, and bam, that's it. Now we need another base, somewhere. It says in recent groups have arisen, including Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, and other Al-Qaeda affiliated groups. However, much of the reason for their rise can be traced back to previous American actions, including the destabilization of Yemen, Somalia, and the overthrow of Colonel Gaddafi in Libya.
But Daisy, that's how it's supposed to work. You stir the pot, you create trouble, and then so you win both ways because you have military contractors going into Libya and doing all the stuff, right? And then you create a problem, and you got to send in more military contractors and spend more in military budget. So it's a win-win for the military complex. What's wrong with that?
I know, right? And it's jobs, right? It's all
It's
about
jobs,
jobs.
of course, for my district. Jobs, yeah.
Yeah, I did see reference in when I was looking through some related pages here to like some operation enduring something. It wasn't profit, but they might as well be.
Yeah, seriously. So it says it is also clear that the United States plays a role in training many nations, soldiers, and security forces, something that also Israeli forces do, right? So for example, the US pays Bancroft International, a private military contractor, to train elite Somali units who are at the forefront of the fighting in the country's internal conflicts. According to the Mail and Guardian, these Somali fighters are likely also funded by US taxpayers. So I hope everyone enjoys that this is what their money is going to.
Yeah, why we can't have nice things.
Exactly. We can't have Medicare for all, right? We can't have.
Do you know how much that would cost? Oh my God. I know it's crazy, and they would never consider, they wouldn't even tell us about this stuff unless you really go digging for it.
Right, and thankfully there are affiliations like Min Press News who they do really great reporting. Unfortunately, they don't get the notoriety or the exposure, to be able to reach as many people, and they get smeared a lot by the mainstream rags, right, essentially.
Yeah.
So it says the U.S. military also occupies the island of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, claimed by the African island nation of Mauritius. In the 1960s and 1970s, the British government expelled the entire local population, dumping them in slums in Mauritius, where most still live. The United States uses the island as a military base and a nuclear weapons station. This island was critical to American military activities both during both Iraq wars and continues to be a major threat, casting a nuclear shadow over the Middle East, East Africa, and East Asia. So, yeah. I mean, again, this is, to me, like, just really sad that, this is what goes on in our name, because that's what people need to keep in mind, is that this is done supposedly to keep us safe. And as I read earlier, a lot of these rebel groups or these terrorist groups or whatever you want to call them, they've actually sprung up as a result of the actions that we've taken across the world. And of course, our favorite, Caitlin Johnstone, right? She recently wrote Don't Forgive right. Bastards, Notes from the Edge of the Narrative Matrix. And there was one line that I really thought that that she hit out the ballpark. So it says, without warmongering and militarism, sociopathic intelligence agencies won't be needed. Without sociopathic intelligence agencies, government secrecy wouldn't be needed. Without government secrecy, the government couldn't commit evil at home and abroad. It all starts with war.
Yeah. Well said. She's
brilliant. Amazing.
Well, she says it's like you know, when they keep telling you that, well, you know, human nature is to be violent, greedy, and whatever, and she said, no, it's not. That's the nature of the ruling elites. That's not the nature of everyone in
Right.
general. And they're used that as a kind of counter argument, so you can't you know, argue with them. Um, but yeah, I thought that was brilliant. I love it when Caitlin Johnston does those pithy. I think she just every time she thinks of something, she writes it down. And then when she has like 10 of them, she publishes them as a
Yeah.
you know, on Medium. That was
Yeah, she
pretty good.
gives credit to her husband for being, I think, a sounding board to, like, you know, bounce ideas off of and refine them, and then she goes with it, you
Is
know.
that okay?
But I read that, like, you know, like a year ago or something like that. She talked about her methodology, but yeah, she's got just really brilliant writer.
But it like the reason why that really resonated with me is because it is really true that, you know, all of our problems essentially are centered around us going to war. And no one wants to talk about it. Everybody, and that's why, you know, even the fact that you have to say domestic, you know, or foreign policy is domestic policy. It's true. You shouldn't have to say that, you know, but it's when it all comes down to, it's all in this effort for war. You know, our economy is based on war. Our our diplomacy, the way that we interact with the rest of the world, is based on war. Everything
Right.
is based on war. You
And
know,
the reason for that is,
money,
which,
money, money,
well, it's money, but it's
and
also like
power,
it's
and
getting
power.
hegemonic control of, you know, make it a colonial a global colonial empire, basically, you know, where you can have
Right.
access to cheap labor and cheap natural resources, right?
Mm.
So whether, you know, ostensibly it's a fight against, you know, radical fundamentalist elements in Africa, or it's a fight against, you know, Russia or whatever, but it ultimately comes down to uh, economics, you know, which is control of cheap materials and cheap labor, you know, and that gets back to the whole Lenin thing, you know, the imperialism, the highest state of capitalism. So I think, yeah, war is an expression. War is the primary tool for that methodology, for that goal. Okay, I do have a kind of a Moscow minute.
All right.
Okay, and I'm going to lead into this through Trump, but I'm going to segue into something else. So
All
I
right.
don't know if you heard, you know, Trump came out recently and said that, basically admitted that he was going to manipulate the post office to kind of suppress um, vote by mail ballots, right? He basically said, I'm not going to pay for overtime. And the post
Oh,
office
yes,
has
yes,
said that,
yes.
you know,
That
this
way
is
up.
going to create problems because, especially in cities, you know, or places that have a lot of people, you know, happen to be people of, tend to be Democratic or whatever, people of color or whatever, they're going to have a harder time getting those ballots processed in time, you know, to count. Now, Trump just appointed a new Postmaster General,
Hmm.
who
Yes.
is I forget his first name, DeJoy, which I think is a great name. But anyways, he's a big fundraiser for he was a big fundraiser for Bush and for other Republicans, but a big Trump fundraiser. And so Trump appointed him to this position, which pays like, you know, $400,000 a year.
So
Um,
draining the swamp.
Draining the
Right.
swamp, right,
Right.
right. His
Right.
friend, who's going to like, who's talking about, you know, efficiency and everything, and he's cutting overtime just right before, you know, you have the elections, right? Well, I did a little research on this guy, and it turns out he's married to this woman.
Yeah.
So he
Aldous
is married
Vos.
to this Aldana Vos. She's
Vos.
a
Okay.
Polish American physician who happens to be the vice chairman of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. Okay, now the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation is a nonprofit anti-communist organization authorized by unanimous act of Congress in 1993, I assume under President Bill Clinton, for the purpose of educating Americans about the ideology, history, and legacy of communism. Okay, and they have said certain things, such as they're a pretty extreme group. For instance, in April 2020, the organization announced they will be adding the global victims of COVID-19 to the death toll of communism, blaming the Chinese government for the outbreak and every death caused by COVID-19. So they're seeing every death of COVID-19 as caused by
Wow.
communism.
Wow,
I thought that
that's
was
bizarre.
that
That
was
is bizarre.
interesting. And
Oh, and one of the I don't know if you saw one of the founders is Mika Brzezinski's dad.
right, a Cold Warrior, right.
The guy that said something to the effect that eventually the media will be able to tell people what to think.
But I thought it's interesting that okay, here's the guy, she's married to the guy who runs the post office, which is trying to suppress voting, and she is supposedly in this organization that's fighting against communism because communism is anti-democratic and stops, people from voting, things like that, right? So it just seems like a kind of a contradiction, that you know
But it
uh,
almost seems like it's apropos for Trump, though, because he does this with every single appointment that he has. It's always the person that should not be in
Yeah,
charge
yeah.
of these departments, that's who he puts in charge.
well, and then this anti-communism foundation, is one of their top researchers is Adrian Zenz, this German guy, Zenz, who's been on Democracy Now!, who's a born again Christian who believes that, who's basically an anti-Semitic German, who believes in the rapture and everything. And he's the one who's the senior advisor for this anti-communist foundation about the Chinese treatment of the Uyghurs. Okay, so I thought that was interesting. Um, So he's a born again Christian. He feels he is led by God in his mission. And so the whole campaign, which is a bipartisan campaign against China about the Chinese treatment of Uyghurs. And I'm not saying Chinese don't mistreat Uyghurs. I'm just saying that they are depending for their information primarily on this guy who believes, who's a born again Christian who's an anti-Semitic German who believes in the rapture. They're depending on this guy for their source of information on Chinese treatment of Uyghurs. So I just thought, politics makes for strange bedfellows, and I think it's like, they will come up with their ultimate goal, and then they will use whatever means they have to achieve that goal. So if the anti-communist organization and this right wing, guy help them achieve their goal of world hegemony, then they will use that. And the truth be damned, it doesn't really matter what the truth is. But I just thought there's a connection here between Trump's post office appointee and this anti-communist organization. So that's my really almost going into conspiracy territory there. But that's my Moscow Minute for today.
Oh,
So do you think Adelson is somewhere in this, or?
I mean, I didn't see his name come up on this, but I mean, he fits into the big picture, no question, right?
Well, because you have to wonder where it is that, I mean, I'm sure that these people are donors to Trump, like that is where he can maybe find some of these people that are in his cabinet. But other than that, I would suppose that it has to be people that are in the circles of the people that he has as donors, right? Because that's the whole point, is that these donors, they have access to Trump, and that they're able to put people in that are able to bring about whatever sort of changes or whatever sort of legislation or, whatever it is that they're looking to bring about, right?
Right. Well, I mean, he's getting someone who's going to directly help him in his efforts to be reelected, right? But he's also connected to this, the deep state, or whatever, for lack of a better term, that's basically been Democratic and Republican for decades. I mean, that's fighting this, this battle for U.S. hegemony around the world, this war machine. So yeah, and I actually just heard that Trump got into a fight with Adelson on the phone, or he basically insulted.
It was about money. It was because Adelson has only given him, I think, like $600,000 this campaign, and he gave him like what, $10 million last time.
Right.
Oh, interesting.
And Adelson kind of bit his tongue and didn't say anything, but I think Trump was like, I mean, Trump's obviously not a very tactful guy, just insulted Adelson when he was on the phone with him. Couldn't you cough up more money? Like, what's your problem?
Holy cow.
But we know this about Trump already, that he's like.
Yeah, no, I know. It's nothing new, but it's like the stuff they go after. It's like with the impeachment, the stuff they go after on Trump is like not really the stuff they should go after. They go after like, Russiagate or whatever, but they don't go after.
It's because they can't go after him for emoluments or whatever, because they're also guilty of it.
So that's the whole thing. It's like that they're both. And that's why the Trump supporters like still support him, because they feel like the Democrats, or the Republicans for that matter, the mainstream Republicans are no worse really, because we're all part of that system. So as far as Trump can be seen as, against that deep state, well, they're going to support him. Like, I mean, I know QAnon, QAnon people who like support this theory that Trump's like the fight is the vehicle, for and evangelical Christians too think somehow he's the vehicle against this. I don't know. So
is that what QAnon is about? I didn't know QAnon was all about that they're like the evangelical Christian.
No, I'm just saying that both groups they support Trump. No, the QAnon people are like they think it's all this child trafficking thing, and Trump's fighting against that somehow, right? I don't know. I mean, it's insane.
So it's curious, like, would they have thought that that was his reason from the beginning to enter the race, rather than like what a lot of people think, that the Clintons thought he'd be really easy to beat, so Bill Clinton gave him a call, and he thought, hey, I can get some publicity for this network I want to launch anyway. So, and then he just rolled with it, and Clinton was so bad that he happened to actually be a viable candidate.
I think he was just trying to enhance his brand. That's why he ran. He didn't expect to win. But I think the people who supported him expected him to win, or they hoped he would win, and they figured he was going to fight against this corrupt, swamp in Washington. And Trump ran on that because he's being the carnival barker that he is. He knew that resonated with people, so he ran on that theme.
Exactly.
And it worked. It worked.
Just
you didn't expect it to, but everybody
where he thought there was an opportunity to get some people interested in his candidacy. Basically.
I mean, I don't think he particularly likes being president, because he actually has to, like, he's in the spotlight all the time, and he actually has to perform, and he doesn't like having to do that. But that's where he is.
He's not hiding in the basement, though.
Right.
And he's had like.
Guys, sorry. So I just want to do my legislative week in review.
Sure.
Let's do it.
Okay. So, that I have been about keeping Congress, or holding Congress accountable, right? And I think that, with all this talk of Kamala being the VP pick, I think that it was put out there, this information was put out there this week, very strategically, because this kind of, especially with the way that the negotiations have just kind of floundered, and the fact that, we have the economic situation that we have, and that Congress has just decided, well, you know what, we're going to go on vacation. We're going to go on our recess while you guys need to figure your shit out. And so while everybody else is talking about Kamala, I wanted to talk about this, which again is just holding their feet to the fire, right? And so this is an article from Salon, and it says Senate for summer break after millions lose COVID benefits. Mitch sends senators home with no deal. Perhaps you mistook them for somebody who gave a damn, said Nancy Pelosi. Which, they always have to have their like snippy little, comebacks. She, like, her tearing up the speech, and her little clap and all that kind of stuff, because that's what really matters. That's what helps you pay your bills at the end of the day, right? So it says Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell adjourned the Senate for the rest of the month without a deal on a new coronavirus relief package, saying on the floor that if a deal is reached, senators will get at least 24 hours notice to return to Washington for a vote. The collapse in talks could deny benefits to as many as 30 million Americans currently collecting unemployment. Moody's recently estimated that the failure to act on an economic bailout could force another 4 million people out of work and cause the economy to contract by another 4%. Because it wasn't already bad enough. Now we definitely, we needed this. We needed for them to go on vacation for a month. And because then remember, even if they come back after a month or whatever, or even if they were to vote tomorrow, it's not as though it's going to pass tomorrow, right? It would take weeks for these things to be implemented, and then weeks after that for people to actually see any sort of relief checks coming their way, which I just think is like, it's crazy. So it says, they're like talking about essentially that Mitch McConnell, he's really softened on, wanting to come up with some sort of bill. I think it's because he has an election coming up, and so he knows that his ass is on the line. And the person who's running against him is actually seems like, they have a lot of support, at least.
Amy McGrath?
What?
Amy McGrath?
Right? Yeah.
She's a hack. I mean.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying she's genuine. I'm just saying that it seems like it's an actual opponent to McConnell. You know what I'm saying? Whereas I don't think he's really run before with an opponent that actually maybe has a chance.
Right, but Booker was the one who lost a primary to Amy McGrath, who would have had a much better chance of beating McConnell, I think. I mean, I think Amy McGrath is basically portrays herself as a Trump Democrat. Like she's basically said she supports Trump half the time or whatever. Maybe that's why she's a threat to McConnell. I mean, she might actually win. I think she's pretty far behind though in the polls.
I don't know. I haven't been keeping up with her.
Yeah.
With
but anyway, sorry to interrupt. Okay.
No, it's okay. I'm just saying that obviously when they're up for election, they act differently, right? Wasn't it Elliot Engel that said that if it wasn't for his election, he wouldn't be out there with the protests or whatever?
Right.
So obviously they just do certain things. And also, Trump signing the executive orders, right before he goes on vacation, of course, he's got to do these things too, because if not, then, that's going to look pretty bad to the voters. But it says, indeed, about 20 Republicans have made clear that they believe the federal legislature has done enough to address the pandemic.
Holy cow.
Isn't that just, that makes me so mad.
Yeah.
It makes me so mad. How dare you say that? And then you have Senator Ron Johnson, who says, from my standpoint, the breakdown in the talks is very good news. It says it's very good news for future generations, because of course now we have the deficit hawks, right?
Yeah.
Not when it comes to the military, okay? Only when it comes to helping out the people, bailing out the people, that is when they have done enough. I mean, I don't know what else could we expect from them? Now,
Ron Johnson is I don't know if there's any connection between him and Johnson, which is based in Wisconsin as well.
Oh, so, really?
Yeah. So you have the
interesting.
So you have the medical connection.
Yeah.
I mean, Johnson's an extremely common name. There may not be any connection there. I can look it up. But I thought that was kind of ironic because Johnson.
I know that'd be pretty interesting to see if there's a connection. Like I said, McConnell, he definitely has softened his tune, because he said the American people need more help. Coronavirus is not finished with our country, so Congress cannot be finished with helping our people.
Oh, that
is a big change of tune.
That's actually fairly hopeful compared to the quotes you were just giving us by the deficit hawks. That's great.
Exactly.
Very hopeful. Yeah.
So obviously, he sent. So technically, they are still in session, but it's like they're on call, right? So if the negotiations fruit something, then they can call back the senators within 24 hours, and they can vote on it, right? It says the abrupt until September 8th, the day after Labor Day, which, if we don't have a general strike going on this Labor Day, I do not know when we are going to have a general strike. Like, this is the year to have a general strike.
Yeah, so that was trending on Twitter like yesterday, right? General strike.
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
It says signals that negotiations haven't progressed since collapsing late last week. Because we have to remember that now Nancy Pelosi, when she was interviewed, she said, hopefully we can get negotiations going again. Because they've taken the executive orders as being like, okay, so now we don't have to do our job. So just like, with the whole going to war thing, they've obfuscated their duties once again to the executive or power. And I mean, like, and for them, obviously it makes no difference because they're living in their cushy little lives. Meanwhile, and of course, and then Nancy Pelosi, she can always just act like, oh, the people need their help. But it's like, I feel like there is more that she could do. There has to be more that she could do than just going on national TV and saying, oh yeah, I thought these people cared. Like, that's not, that to me just does not seem like anywhere near.
Like, no one has any strategic plan. Like, no one's saying, like, okay, what do the next 2 years look like? Like, what's the plan? What do the next 3 or 5 years look like? Like, what's the plan for the economy? What's the plan for, how are we dealing with this virus, or, testing and a vaccine? Like, what are all the steps? I haven't seen anyone come up with like a timeline. This is what we're going to do, the whole big picture of the economy, the pandemic, for the next few years. It's all about, like you say, it's just posturing.
Yeah, it's all seat of the pants.
Right. And supposedly the reason that there is so much like contention between the Republicans and the Democrats regarding these bills is because it's the way that they're looking at the recovery, right? So according to them, it's that the Democrats, they aren't seeing a recovery happening anytime soon. And the Republicans, they see the economy as ascendant, that the economy is on the rise. That's why that nothing else needs to be done. And I just wanted to say that I think that it's very important to look at how I haven't heard of these senators all in, like, going nuts online, going crazy, saying, why are we on recess? Why are we not, actually in session right now, trying to come up with something, especially your VP pick, Kamala Harris. I haven't seen her coming out and saying, hey, this is irresponsible for us to be not to be in session when look at the state of the economy. If supposedly, her and Biden are the ones who are like all about the pandemic, and, they're the ones who have a plan, and they're the ones who know how to get us out of this and all that. Well, I mean, I would think that at the very least, she could say, this is irresponsible. I mean, maybe she has. I just haven't seen it.
Yeah, I think there were some that are up for re-election that are saying this is really awkward to go back and try and have to deal with all these people that are going to be screaming at us. I think some of them were not happy about it for purely political re-election reasons.
Right. Right. But, for Kamala, this is a good opportunity for her to just go on her tour, now with Biden.
Yeah. And how is this going to play out? How does this politically play out for them for the convention, right? They can once again point to, the Republicans did it. The Republicans wouldn't work with us or whatever, so that politically is not a bad place for them.
The scary thing though is that, let's say they win in 2020 and they win in this election in 2024, it sets the stage for a really, competent authoritarian figure, who's going to say, look, I have a plan for the next couple of years. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do this infrastructure. We're going to do all this stuff. I mean, they would seem so competent compared to with Congress and compared to Trump and compared to Biden, Harris, that they might, if they could easily win. And this is what, I don't know if you saw, Thomas Frank came out with he wrote What's the Matter with Kansas back in the 90s. Why do people vote against their own interests? Speaking of Kansas, he recently came out with a new book called The People Know, A History of Anti-Populism. So he is like, he sees Trump as being just a bumbling idiot, but obviously he was in the right place at the right time. And if you have populism's on the rise now, and if you have somebody coming in 4 years who actually is competent, because authoritarian figures can be competent, they can get stuff done, and people are going to be thirsting for somebody who's actually going to take charge and is going to do, how whether it's a Chavez or a Stalin or a Hitler, you can have some strong figure who's going to make these big changes, come hell or high water, because Congress is not able to do it. I mean, Kamala Harris is just, like you say, Daisy. I mean, this is a golden opportunity for them to say, let's all get back. Let's go back to Congress. Let's cut our vacation short. Let's solve this problem. Let's do this. Like, they're not doing that. Maybe there's a couple of exceptions, but no one's really coming to the forefront and saying this, let's show some leadership. And that's what's missing, is a leadership. So,
right.
2024, I wouldn't be surprised if you do have somebody coming forward and, who's actually a leader who's competent. That's why people want, like, Bloomberg, right? They want somebody who's like, or Jeff Bezos, maybe he'll come out, for 2024, somebody who's like, who's run a company, who's like going to run it like a business or whatever. That's what scares me.
Well, that was the appeal of Trump to some extent, probably, like,
Yeah, except Trump was like, Trump steaks and Trump vodka and Trump University, right? It wasn't like, it wasn't real businesses that were really successful. And if you had somebody who actually had, the background, it would be different.
Yeah, but he played that part. I mean, he
played the part.
He fooled people into, not looking at the failures, and
he had the TV show, so people thought, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
All right. So, but keeping with Congress, okay?
Yes. Sorry.
All right. So then the other thing that I wanted to share with you guys is this, because while everyone is going through this level of uncertainty, right? We know, and this is something that just really makes me upset, because while they want to go on vacation, Congress goes on vacation, they're still getting paid. That is like, what drives me nuts. They are getting paid through all this, and which is why they don't care. I mean, besides the fact that they're all millionaires pretty much, and they don't even really need the salary, right? And this is what kind of goes into, it says, why are U.S. taxpayers providing, and this is from Forbes, why are U.S. taxpayers providing public pensions to millionaire members of Congress? So we all know that, like, Nancy Pelosi is like 100+ millionaire and all that jazz, right? And so it says, membership in the U.S. Congress is an exclusive club that comes with lucrative taxpayer-funded privileges. Retirement perks include a lifetime pension and a taxpayer-matched savings plan with a taxpayer-paid contributions of up to 5% of salary. So, and this was crazy. Former Speaker Paul Ryan was eligible to draw an $84,930 pension when he turned 50 in January after serving for 20 years and retiring at age 48. Meanwhile, what is the retirement age for Social Security? I think, isn't it like 65?
Yeah, I think 65. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Biden talked about making it 60.
Oh,
Hillary
oh my God.
Hillary had actually talked about making it 55. And things are so bad these days that actually looks pretty good. Or I'm also a lot older.
Okay, so it says, why are U.S. taxpayers providing public pensions to millionaire members of Congress on top of a 401k style plan? The median net worth for a member recently exceeded $1.1 million. That is crazy. And this information is from openthebooks.com. It's the auditors at openthebooks.com. They looked.
Of course, they make most of their money out of Congress. So once they leave their revolving door, go into the private sector, they make way more money there than they ever made in Congress. So that pension and all that stuff is dwarfed by what they're going to make afterwards.
Right.
See, you kind of wonder. So basically, this shows, that they're doing fine. They're not worried about the people, and apparently, the fact that they walked away from these negotiations, they're not worried because of the protests and everything. Apparently, they're not really worried that the people are getting ready to do, a general strike or hit, really, really do some radical things to try and get some, services out of this government. I think they just think they're going to be able to keep go on as they always have, just like feeding silly lines and using identity politics to divert people from the fact that they're really getting screwed.
Right, because either way, they're going to make their money, whether it's that they end up becoming a lobbyist after they leave office, or they just go into industry, or, I mean, if they want to retire, that's a pretty sweet retirement. I mean, on top of everything that they already have or have made.
Now,
right?
can I play devil's advocate here for a second? I mean, they get paid. The salary is $174,000 a year. That's for representatives and senators. I personally think they should increase that to like $400,000 a year. Cut the retirement benefits, cut the healthcare benefits after retire. Totally ban lobbyists, private money. Stop the revolving door. You have to have at least 5 years after you leave Congress before you work for any company that is all related to government. So that they, because first of all, you can't live in Washington on $174,000 a year. And go back to your district and everything. Like you can't. The prices are like in Georgetown or places in there. Like you can't do it. So like pay them a decent salary, but then make it very strict that you can't, take this other corrupting money from outside, because ultimately it ends up costing us way, way more. I mean, this looks like a lot of money, and it is, but the money that the lobbyists are paying for these campaigns and everything, I mean, that is screwing the American people big time. So we're paying all this money for these wars abroad because of these bribes paid to these Congress people. That's costing us way more than congressional pensions. So ultimately, you have to get rid of the corrupting influence of money. And sure, everyone likes to say, well, they voted themselves another raise or whatever, but just pay them a decent salary, but create restrictions like how many terms they can serve. I know you're going to disagree with me, Daisy, but I'm like, you can't. If you get $174,000, either you're independently wealthy when you come into DC, or else you're going to be on the take from day one, because you can't run a campaign. You can't get reelected. You can't live on that amount of money in DC. It sounds like a lot of money for us, but it's really not.
I mean, I agree that obviously we need to take out all the measures that are, caked in legally to be able to take these bribes, essentially, right? And so I definitely think that there should be, limits on, I think there is a limit now. I think it's like, what, 2 years? You have to wait 2 years in order to become a lobbyist or something. It used to be more, and then they brought it down, and now.
Yeah, but you can go work for Goldman Sachs right after you, if you leave, you may not be a lobbyist directly, but you work with a lobbyist at Goldman Sachs. So what's the difference?
Right. No, I mean, like I said, I agree with that, but I just think that when it comes to, it doesn't matter how much money you pay these people, there's always going to be more money that can be thrown in their face, and they're going to take that. So that's why I don't think that it's the salary. It's funny because actually Jesse Ventura agrees with you in that they should raise the salary of the representatives and the Congress people. But I think that it should be the opposite. I think that everything should be tethered. Their salary, their benefits should all be tethered to what the majority of the rest of the country has, because that incentivizes them. If like, let's say, for instance, one of the big arguments that one of the reasons why they don't really care about Medicare for all is because guess what? They've got really nice health insurance plans. They're not worried about that shit, or like the rising housing costs or anything. They don't care about that stuff. Why? Because they've got all this money coming in. It's not an issue for them. So yes, while we take away all these ways of being able to legally bribe them, that I definitely agree with. But I think that, if minimum wage is going to be $7.25, well, then your wages are going to be $7.25, and then we're going to see how quickly they're going to raise those wages from $7.25 to what it should be at over $21 an hour, which is what it should be if it was in line with productivity. That's
Yeah,
just
and have them get Affordable Care Act coverage and all that good stuff. Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you sound like a communist, Daisy. I mean, that's an assault on freedom. You're making it
did I
dependent
not
on
wear my
other
commie
people.
hat? My bad.
Yeah.
All right. So it says House Speaker Nancy Pelosi net worth estimated 50 million to 72 million, which I
That's
don't
just
really know
herself,
where.
not her husband, right?
Right. That's just herself. And she has. I don't think she's ever been in the private sector. She's only ever served in the public sector, and she's worth 50 to 72 million dollars. Just saying. She'll reap 153,967 a year in public pension and Social Security benefits at retirement. In addition, Pelosi could cash out an estimated $1 million lump sum through her federal saving account. And that's just a portion of the account that was taxpayer funded. Our auditors calculated that Speaker Nancy Pelosi earned $5.7 million in salary to date during her 34-year congressional career. Pelosi's salary ranged from $77,400 in 1987 to today's $223,500 as the most highly compensated member of Congress. So when people ask why it is that so many people have beef with Nancy Pelosi, maybe it's because she's the one who makes the most money, supposedly.
Right, but that's if you look at that salary though, divided by like 34 years, it's only like it's like $130,000.
But that's just what is taxpayer funded. You know what I mean? Like that's my point. Is that this is that's a lot of money, and that's only what is like publicly known, what's on the books essentially. All right, so our estimates are in good faith based on the published rules. Complicating matters, Pelosi doesn't disclose her congressional benefits on her financial disclosures, nor did she respond to our request for a comment. So Senate Leader Mitch McConnell, net worth estimated at $22 million. During his 36 years of public service in Congress, our auditors calculated that McConnell earned $5.5 million in salary. McConnell's salary ranged from $75,100 in 1985 to today's $193,400 as the second highest paid member of Congress, which I would think that it'd be the opposite. I would have thought that the Senate was more highly paid than
They're paid
Speaker.
the same, and the base salary is the same, right? Maybe they get additional pay, but it's $174,000 is the base salary for both houses of Congress, I believe.
Well, you saw that Nancy Pelosi's pay now is $200. I mean, maybe that's for the speakership.
Speakership gets extra.
Yeah, that's her little extra, her little bonus. Here you go.
But you're in Congress, you never pay for a meal, you never pay for anything, you never pay for a drink. Like everything is.
I know. I always thought that was so messed up that it's always the celebrities and all this that they get all this free shit when they don't need free shit. They have all the money in the world. Why are you giving them all this free stuff? I mean, I get it. Obviously, it's advertising and all this kind of stuff, but whatever. All right, so it says, in retirement, McConnell can cash out the estimated $1.1 million as a lump sum or as he wishes. Then there is lifetime pension payout. The researchers at the National Taxpayers Union pegged McConnell's pension and annuity package at $142,902 annually if he retired after the November election. McConnell, age 78, qualifies for a $96,000 or over $96,000 pension, and he's also eligible for Social Security amounting to an additional $46,164 each year. When, again, obviously, there is no need for that, right? So it says, critics say members of Congress shouldn't be able to double dip in taxpayer-funded retirement plans, since representatives can already take advantage of the lucrative 401k style plan with a 5% match. Why can't members have the option to opt out of the public pension plan? Which I think that would be pretty okay. Obviously, like they're accumulating the benefits, which is fine, but if there's no need for them to actually continue to take these funds, then why can't they opt out of it, right? So it says in 1994, then elected Representative Dr. Tom Coburn was able to opt out of his federal pension by using a little known loophole. But Congress eliminated that option by changing the law in 2004 Appropriations Act. Today, U.S. Senator Mike Braun feels it is imperative that members have the choice to forego the generous public pension. His bill makes it possible for members to opt out. So it says Braun's bill passed the Senate in December 2019 to Leader McConnell's credit, which you do have to give him credit for that, right? However, the legislation is stuck in Speaker Pelosi's House awaiting a markup in the Committee on House Administration led by Representative Zoe Lefgren of California, of course, again, the progressive bastion of the world, right? Or of the United States.
Crazy stuff. Yeah, I mean, it just confirms every motivating factor, to do the right thing for constituents is, backwards, right? Everywhere where they get their money motivates them to do exactly what the people don't need.
I think the way around this is, I mean, ultimately, again, when you get into revolutionary mass movements, is like you work within the system as much as you can. You try to elect progressive Democrats, or progressives
incrementalism. Yep.
What?
Incrementalism, right?
No, I mean, saying like you get like Cory Bush, you get people in there. I mean, you people who are, or you get like Alex Morse, or these different people, who are going to be on the fringe of the party, right? But then you also have to create parallel structures. I mean, that's what ultimately, like, Bitcoin is and I know, Daisy, you had a friend, maybe we'll talk in a future episode about cryptocurrencies, but these are a real threat to the system. So if you have a parallel system set up that can threaten the system, like if you have a parallel system of local government, for instance, that would be parallel to a city council and would kind of like address people's needs, or address, maybe there would be an alternative policing system or community, whatever you want. Maybe you don't call it police, but whatever, you have some kind of system to address people's concerns and maintain order, parallel to the existing structures. I think that's what we need. And moving for a People's Party, in a way, in a political level, that's what that is. It's kind of like setting up a parallel system that is working not within the existing party, but outside of the existing party. So I think you have to do both. And it can be for good and bad. I mean, obviously Hitler did that in Germany. They set up this whole system of Nazi organization in the country, where they had instead of the states and like they had in Germany, they had like different states, like Bavaria or Prussia, but they also, in the Nazi party, they had their own divisions that were separate. Sometimes they corresponded to the actual political division, sometimes they were different, and they had, they're called GAUs, and they had a Gauleiter for each one, and so it was a parallel structure, and it was very effective in co-opting the power from the ineffective established power. But I mean, that could also be a good thing too, if you have a progressive movement setting up a parallel structure to kind of outside of the. So I think it's like you have to work within the system as much as you can, but then obviously the system is so corrupt, you can't depend on incrementalism to get stuff done. But if you have enough stuff going on the outside, that can sometimes pressure the established system to make change more rapidly than they would otherwise. And I don't know. I see MPP. I see as the hopeful thing in this convention coming up. I think it's very exciting that we have. Who were the speakers there? I mean, was it?
Yeah, Cornel West and Nina Turner.
Right?
Yeah, and actually, an environmentalist will be talking. Talking, and
but those are big names. I mean, that's fantastic.
Jimmy Dore will be
Jimmy
there.
Dore, right?
He'll be live streaming it. They bring up a lot of the Movement for People's Party has been bringing up a lot how, don't get discouraged, because essentially what we're talking about, what we want, happened in Mexico just recently over the past, 4 or 5 years. Essentially, it was completely progressive parties have taken over the entire government, and that's that can happen here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it starts as a grassroots thing, from outside, and somehow it because there's a need for it, because
Yeah.
the main parties aren't addressing the issues.
Yeah, right now the Movement for a People's Party is the most likely vehicle I see for that happening. But you know, there's enough people that are angry with the way things are. It's just it's figuring out how to organize that in a way that can tackle the establishment.
Right.
And with that, we maybe have completed our 700th show.
13th episode.
Oh, 13. Okay.
Lucky 13.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Okay.
Enjoy a nice, cool, beautiful day out there.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Peace out.
Peace.